Will there be a demand for big open spaces post-COVID-19? Award-winning futurist, researcher, and keynote speaker Nikolas Badminton joins us on Canada Now. And Nick, what do you think? Are we going to be asking for more parks when we come out of this pandemic?
I certainly think that the urban planners around the world are starting to look at everything a lot more differently with the lack of cars on the road and with the way that the cities have been designed to put cars and transportation getting from A to B in the most efficient way possible versus building it for humans and the ability to have space and connection.
Well, and that's it. And you've been looking into the idea of bringing human-centered design back to cities because really, as you've mentioned, you know, we look at a city, a typical city, and it really has been built for cars and less so for us. Now, is San Francisco looking at the idea of being a healthier city and actually building a city that's for, who would have thought, people?
Yeah, they're trying to reclaim land from cars right now. They're trying to start thinking about what a smart city looks like, and that's beyond sensors and big data, artificial intelligence and technology, back to sort of the reclamation of the streets. So instead of like 4-lane highways through the center of towns, it's reduced down to single lanes in both directions. And then you're reclaiming it with like green spaces, parklets, spaces for people to congregate and get together. And really what we're finding in the world is that, you know, research is starting to show us that human connection is doubly needed right now because isolation is one of the biggest problems in cities. Even though we live on top of each other, we don't talk to each other. And it's because the spaces that we've designed are designed for industry. They're not designed for human society.
Well, but does this, a plan like that coincide with what might happen in the auto industry anyway? I mean, maybe we're far away from this happening if it happens at all, but the future of the auto industry, and we've talked about that before, are we going to be using less cars anyway? Are we going to be ride sharing all the time anyway? Is the day going to come where we look at the idea of going out and spending a lot of money and buying a car and parking it in a garage that's located in our house as barbaric, that, you know, you want a car, you open up the app on your phone, one comes within a few minutes or so, you pop in the car, you get in the car just by having it read your phone, and that car becomes your home office until you get to work or wherever you're going to go.
You know, this is the dream. This is the exponential idea of what the world could be. I think it's going to take some time to get there. But, you know, what we're seeing as part of the pandemic is, or the auto industry is being devastated. I think it was Nissan that said it was a $900 million loss in the past quarter. So it's you know, we're starting to see challenges there. I mean, who's really jumping in their car driving? Who's commuting right now? We're seeing nitrous dioxide levels like dropping, CO2 levels dropping. The air's cleaner. It's a lot better. You know, this is an opportunity to stop and realize that the industrial complex has kind of failed us in terms of creating a sustainable and resilient world. That maybe if we push away the need for vehicles, we go back to municipal transportation, maybe we hop on bicycle when the weather's decent enough to do so. This is going to provide a better world for us. And then we can start thinking about self-driving cars, ride sharing and the such like. But, you know, people are just really trying to work out what this looks like. Right now, a lot of people have got cars in their garages and they're looking at this, you know, $60,000 vehicle or $20,000 vehicle, or whatever, and wondering, you know, why they have it, why they're paying insurance, why premiums are going up and whatever. This is a big reckoning for the automotive industry and the insurance industry and the transportation industry as a whole. But it's easy to say that when you're in a dense city like Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, wherever. When you're out in more rural areas, you still need that transportation. So it's just working out what's going to happen next. I personally would like to see a bigger push towards electric vehicles. We've spoken about that before. I drive one. I don't have to go to refuel. I just plug it into the wall at my house. So, you know, we're starting to see that people are going to open their minds to new ways of living and working. But there's a big consideration here. It's the cost to get in that game. It's the cost to really get on board with this new world.
Well, had the planning been to achieve a healthier city, would we have to be socially distancing the way we are right now?
Well, if you think about this, if you're walking on sidewalks, and we've all done this in the past few weeks, you're literally like stood at the edges or walking out into the road to avoid people. If you actually design a city around people and cohabiting spaces, and vehicles become a secondary factor in design, do we even have sidewalks? How much more pedestrian areas would we actually have? Imagine if Queen Street or Gastown in Vancouver, Queen Street in Toronto, whatever. Imagine all these places being 100% pedestrianized. It would actually be pretty incredible as an experience. And sure, cars and people driving would be put out, but at the same time, for such a small inconvenience, we've got a huge amount of benefit.
Okay, so let's look at, we mentioned parks. Let's look at a few different places in which we typically visit, maybe that we have in the past. But getting back to parks briefly for a moment, are parks going to become less a specific destination spot? Like, that's where I go to take my kid to play soccer, or that's where I go to take my kids to visit a specific playground. Is it going to actually become more of just a place to go and wander around? Like we used to do when we would go to the mall. Remember, like we were younger, we would, I got nothing to do. Let's go out. Where are we going to go? Well, there's nowhere to go. Let's go to the mall. Like it was just a place to walk around. Are parks going to become more of that?
Yeah, I think they already are a little bit. I think what we're going to see is a reclamation of more spaces that have been taken over by things that I think are becoming fast outdated, like golf, municipal golf courses and the such like. I think they're going to be reclaimed. I think we're going to have people walking. People like to, have routes to go walking and exploring and whatever. People like to get outside. I just think that once we start moving to this world where we can take back more of the space for everyone in the city, then we're going to find that people are going to want to wander. People are going to want to be outside more. We can plan more activities, more community get-togethers. And I just think it's going to be better for the health and wellness and overall spirit for communities outside of ideas of what's happening with the pandemic and back to normal society.
Well, you mentioned golf courses and public golf courses in Canada. 51 courses across Canada between 2015 and 2018 are gone. So maybe do you think that golf courses might be the first places that we would look at and say, do we really need those?
Do you know what's really interesting? There's a whole bunch of stories out there about how some locals, when I was living in Vancouver, how some locals were going in and they were doing they were planting mini gardens behind trees so that they could grow food on these sort of municipal golf courses because it was sort of a protest against the usage of that land. Yeah, I was out in Windsor, Ontario, and there was a huge golf course. Now it's a frisbee golf course, but it's been reclaimed for people to do more with it than just that. And I think that you cannot have such large amounts of land for very few people for one particular activity anymore. It shows exclusivity. It shows a whole bunch of privilege. And you know what? It's time that we sort of rise up and sort of say, you know what? We need to be egalitarian and we need to open the spaces for everyone.
You know what I'm curious about? For many, many years, leading up to about a year or two ago, I would drive by a cemetery, and it was just kind of like a fleeting thought, and then I brushed it off because I thought it was ridiculous. But I would think, aren't we running out of places to bury people? I started thinking that, and then we actually had a guest on this it was like a year or two ago, and I forgot where. I think it was out in BC, where there was actually a study that was done. They were saying, geez, at the rate of people dying, and it was a typical rate at the time, we're going to run out of spaces. Now, maybe that's what changes in the future is how we are going to what we're going to do, what we're going to do with our deceased if we're not going to have these plots that are all right next to each other. If we're going to start, if there's going to be more cremations, if there are going to be, if it's going to be a ritual. New Orleans does it where they're stacked on top of each other. I wonder if that's going to change.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't done a ton of research in that particular area, but what's quite interesting is that there are a lot of spaces in cities given to cemeteries, and for a long time people have chosen to be cremated. It takes up less space. Personally, I'd like to look at some of the new options of being cremated, put into a rocket, and blown into space. But that's just my personal choice, right? Yeah. Why do we need these huge amounts of land? It's ritual, it's societal, it's honoring our forefathers and foremothers, right? If you go to Asia, it's really interesting. Now, I spent a lot of time going to Hong Kong, and they've still got graveyards, and they've actually got places like the Polin Monastery where you do have people on top of people on top of people, and they're cremated and they're there in bulk. And I do think that this is still going to be a ritual. I still think that it's really important to understand our heritage, who came before us, our relatives, to show our thanks for those generations of history. Do we industrialize that? Do we make it more efficient? Do we create a whole new industry around it? Well, that's already happening, and I think that we need to talk about that on a separate show.
I don't take this the wrong way, but I'm really looking forward to your funeral, because that sounds like it's going to be like the most exciting one that I'm ever going to go to. If there's going to be a rocket ship there, I'm there. I'm in.
That's probably the darkest thing that someone said to me in quite a few years. But, we're friends, so this is fine. I get what you're saying. I mean, you know what? This is kind of interesting. There are actually a lot of different ways that we can plan to escape this mortal coil, and I think that we're going to get creative. I mean, there's all sorts of options where you can be planted in the ground with a tree, and that's been done for a long time. But yeah, let's definitely do a show on that one, Jeff.
Okay, we've got to do that. And don't get me wrong. What I'm saying is, I don't want you to die, but when that time comes, assuming you go before I do, when you do die, I'm going to say, I'm really bummed Nick died. On the other hand, his funeral is going to be a blast. Huh? I'm just saying. Okay, yes. Malls. Do you think malls are going to make a comeback?
Well, what is it? One of the biggest mall operators in America is going to open like dozens of them this weekend. Yeah. So we can't. If you look down to the US and even across Canada, this is like a big social experiment. It's like a big biomedical experiment. It's a petri dish. We're trying new things out. What can we do to try and alleviate ourselves and the boredom and the retail that we must go out and buy things? How do we get that back into society? You know what? Are we still going to go to malls? I think that's very much a 21st century invention. We go to malls, we get together, we buy a bunch of stuff, we surround ourselves with brands. It makes us feel better. It's a psychological comfort pillow, as it were. So are they going to disappear? No. Are people right now going to malls? No. When America opens up this weekend and all those malls are open, should Americans go to them? Absolutely not. But I think that to be very careful when we start to lean onto this capitalist experience when we're trying to have sort of societal connection. But we've kind of been forced to connect, our social ways with capitalism, and what we buy and the brands we associate ourselves with are status symbols. I'd love to see a world where we can take off that sort of association and be sort of independent human society again. But you know what? We're already entrenched. It's very difficult to sort of get out of that right now.
I wonder, though, we talk about bigger spaces and what might change with them, or if they make a comeback, depending on what we're talking about. But I wonder with smaller spaces as well, like restaurants. I always think about the restaurant industry. I know so many people that are in the restaurant industry, and I feel terrible for them right now. Will they need to adjust? Will they need to have bigger establishments? Will they, obviously have their establishments, but are they going to be forced to have less tables so that people aren't in such close proximity with each other?
Yeah, they're already starting to do it in places like Taiwan, where they're having 1.5 meters to 2 meters between tables. I think it's like 1.5 meters outside and 2 meters inside. So we're already starting to see that. I think people are going to get back to restaurants. I'm yearning to go back to a restaurant with my partner. We love that experience anyway, and we miss that very much. But what we're going to find is that you're going to have to book your sitting. You're probably going to have restaurants that are doing separate sittings. People are going to be spread out in the restaurant, and it's going to be something that's a little bit more distant for the time being until we get a grip on the current situation.
Check out NikolasBadminton.com. Futurist researcher, keynote speaker, Nick Badminton. Nick, appreciate it as always. Don't die, and we'll talk again next week.
Absolutely, we will, Jeff.